So now I want to get into our next guest. We have 4 Democratic New York State candidates running for the New York State Attorney General's office, and we are blessed by the presence of.
You said it perfectly last time.
I did. Leecia Eve. I love that last name. It almost sounds like that's a nickname, like on Facebook or something. Like, you don't know too many people last name Eve, but definitely, we definitely wanted to have you here. Like I said, we'd like to inform the public on the candidates and give them a look at it. So look at the candidates so they can make informed decisions at the ballot box. So before we get started, let me give you an official People Before Politics welcome.
Thank you so much. I mean, it really is a pleasure to be here.
And I know campaigning is what you're doing at this time, and I know you're running. Like I said, I know you were at my current church and my former church,
yes.
Greater Centennial and St. Catherine in Rochelle, earlier today. So you've been making the rounds, but I thank you for making time out of your schedule to come down here.
Of course, so happy to do it. I mean, I really appreciate the work that you and Bob do to help educate and inform, because I believe it's more important to do that than ever. We have so many challenges that we are dealing with as a community, as a state, as a nation. That's frankly the main reason why I'm running to be the Attorney General. But I think the more information that is out there for your viewers and listeners to have, the better off we'll all be. I mean, it's a saying that's been around a long time, but it's still true. Knowledge is power.
Absolutely. Well, I want to welcome a few more people. Kenneth Chamberlain is on the check-in. Frank Trulio, Uncle Frank's on the check-in. Damon, who you met, who has moderated the panel.
Yes,
He and I are partners. He's also the host, but he couldn't make it today. He got crazy work hours, but he wanted to say hello to you.
Oh, hi back.
Also, Sean Patterson Howard.
Yes, and I forgot. I'm sorry, I didn't mention her name.
Mount Vernon's distinguished native daughters, along with Donnie Starchild
Moore. Yes.
Just want to
check it in from North Carolina, and my friend Rodney Norman from Long Island, who's listening from Kansas City.
Oh wow!
So we have a lot of people today who might not normally listen, or we only deal in Westchester issues. We got people around the state definitely listening that are not usual every week listeners tuning in to hear what you have to say.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, as I said, it's really wonderful to be here. I mean, as you stated in your intro, I am running for Attorney General of our great state, and I want to just emphasize a lot of your listeners and viewers are very informed.
Pull the mic a little closer.
A lot
it
of
moves. You can just pull it up.
And viewers are very informed. Does that work?
Yes.
Okay.
Good. I want everybody to hear you. Yes.
But I was in Mount Vernon this morning, and someone said, "Well, I live in the Bronx. I can't vote for you." I said, "No, yes, you can. This is a statewide office."
Right.
And so, if I may, AJ, just take a moment. The Attorney General of the state of New York is the chief legal officer for the entire state. A state of almost 20 million people,
right,
with 62 counties in it,
right,
of which Westchester is one, but a really, really big and a very important one.
Right.
So wherever you call New York State home, whatever community is in Westchester, if you live in New York City, if you live on Long Island, if you live in Central New York or Western New York, if you're a registered Democrat, I am, with great respect and humility, asking for your vote on September 13th, and my ballot position is 7A. But I am running because now more than ever, New Yorkers need someone to protect, defend, and empower them. We've got this unprecedented assault from Donald Trump on virtually every single right that we as a people and as New Yorkers hold dear. Civil rights, environmental rights, LGBTQ rights, women's rights, reproductive rights, pay equity. He's trying to roll back criminal justice reforms that took place under the presidency of Barack Obama. There's almost no area of progress where this president is not seeking to roll it back. And it's the Attorney General of the state of New York, frankly, more than any other state in the country, that plays the most important role in fighting against those rollbacks. And I am the most qualified, most prepared, most experienced person to not only fight back against Donald Trump, but to win. But I'm also best prepared to deal with all the challenges we have at home. And I know that, you know, in past shows you have talked about, and your guests have talked about, the many challenges we have in Westchester and across the state. Our criminal justice system, the fact that it is unfair, particularly to black and brown young men, that predated Donald Trump. So we can't blame that on him.
Right.
And that's an issue that we own as a community, that we own as a state. The fact that we don't have the kind of educational opportunities and the economic opportunities that all of our children should have, no matter where they call home, that also predates Donald Trump, and that is something that we own. We've got the opioid crisis. We never dealt as a state, as a nation, with the crack crisis as we should have. But with the opioid crisis is now an opportunity to get it right the second time. We have a housing crisis, not just in terms of affordability, but in terms of discrimination and in terms of people having a place that they think is affordable to live in, but when they turn over their hard-earned dollars to their slum landlords, they're living in places that are literally unfit in which to live. So we have a tremendous list of challenges that are extraordinary, that we as a state own, and at the same time we have this assault, unfortunately, from somebody who's the president of the United States on so many things that we hold dear. And so we need to have an attorney general who's ready to roll, to hit the ground running, and I am that woman, and that is why I'm running, and that is why I'm asking for your viewers and listeners' support.
Now, it's funny you talked about Trump. So Barbara Underwood, who's filled in since Eric Snyderman had to step down voluntarily, she's been very active in going after Trump because his businesses and a lot of things that were the corruption and alleged crimes took place in New York State.
Oh, absolutely. And I listen, I think Barbara Underwood is doing an extraordinary job as Attorney General, so that everyone understands she is the Attorney General. She's not acting. She is the Attorney General
right,
until the stroke of midnight on December 31st. And then whomever wins the general election for Attorney General in November becomes the Attorney General on January 1. But her work has been extraordinary, and her work really falls into two buckets as it relates to Donald Trump. One is Donald Trump the man, Donald Trump the business person, Donald Trump who founded Trump University, that is a sham for-profit college. It took a lot of New Yorkers and a lot of other people around the country for a ride. And so Attorney General Eric Schneiderman sued Trump University and got some compensation for people who were completely fleeced. Young people who thought that they were going to get this great education from Trump University, and they got nothing but a bunch of bills. We've got the Trump Foundation, another sham. Have you ever heard of a foundation whose board of directors hasn't met in 19 years? Well, that's what the Trump Foundation is.
I didn't know that.
People contributing, they think to a nonprofit entity, and he's using hundreds of thousands of dollars to pay settlements and to pay for a portrait that is, hung in one of his golf clubs. So we have a whole series of issues and investigations and prosecutions ultimately focused on Trump the person, and that's another reason why the New York Attorney General is so important, because as you said, he's a resident of New York. His assets are here. A lot of his cronies are here. Michael Cohen, who was his lawyer, who said under oath that, in effect, that the President of the United States, or the candidate at the time, directed him to commit a crime for the purpose of silencing women so that he could become the next president. So we have a whole set of investigations and prosecutions tied to him personally, but then we have a whole nother area where Barbara Underwood is focused, and where I would continue as Attorney General on January 1, that's focused on the Trump administration's policies. So his rollback of the Clean Water Act, his having someone who heads up the education department that wants to use education dollars to give guns to teachers. So there's a series of administration policies that are important that the next Attorney General fight back against. And again, I'm most prepared and best prepared to do that.
Well, I want to touch upon a bunch of topics, but one that we always talk about and comes up quite frequently on this show, and we cover in the paper, is the national thing of black men being killed by the police.
Right.
And we have two people on the listening right now, Kenneth Chamberlain Jr., whose father was killed by the White Plains Police Department, and Stan Ridley, whose son was a black cop who got killed by the county police department, both who have called for the Attorney General's office to investigate to no avail, and they've been both fighting for justice for the homicide. And there's several other unsolved homicides, but those particular in the hands of the police. And there's this other case, the Eric Garner situation, where it was against police policy. The chokehold was against police policy, but it was not against the law, and no one has gone to jail. The only person that actually went to jail is the guy who videotaped the situation. I think he's the only person that served time.
Yeah, which is absolute insanity.
So how would you, you being if you were elected the new Attorney General, how would you handle these situations in ways that we have not got any kind of justice in those situations yet?
Well, first of all, condolences are not going to bring these fine young people back, but I do want to share my condolences with the persons who are listening and watching right now. I can only begin to imagine the pain that they must feel. It's another reason why this office is important, because within the past few years, under an executive order that was issued by the governor 2.5 years ago, the Attorney General of the state of New York is now the special prosecutor automatically. There's no is she or is she not. The Attorney General of the state of New York is automatically the special investigator and prosecutor in any instance where a New Yorker anywhere in the state who is in the custody of law enforcement and who is unarmed ultimately is killed by whatever means. A chokehold in the custody. In the case of India Cummings, a 27-year-old woman from my hometown of Buffalo who was arrested, put in the Erie County Holding Center, was unarmed, so she was in the custody of law enforcement, had medical issues that went completely untreated.
Like Raynette Turner and Mount Vernon.
And ultimately was found dead on the floor of her jail cell in her own urine and vomit. And ultimately, a medical review board at the State Department of Corrections determined that based upon their very extensive factual findings, that her death was a homicide because the medical treatment, or the lack thereof, that she did not receive. So what the term was used, shocked the conscience as to constitute a homicide. Unfortunately, something like this happening one time is one time too many. And now the Attorney General of the state of New York has the explicit authority to investigate or prosecute in any of those instances. And I know in the case of India Cummings, Attorney General Barbara Underwood was looking to whether she would conduct her own investigation. A grand jury has actually been impaneled in Western New York. I was on the record very early on saying this case cries out for an investigation. Someone is clearly unarmed. They're in the holding cell. They're in medical distress. They're not getting the appropriate care, and they're now dead. This must be investigated, and wherever that investigation leads, if it leads to prosecution, then it needs to be prosecuted as a homicide. So there's a tremendous power of the Attorney General's office to prosecute in these kind of cases, and I can't prejudge what may happen with any instance in the future. I hope as Attorney General, I never have to deal with someone who is in the custody of law enforcement, who was unarmed, and who winds up dead. But if I do, I will use the full powers of the Attorney General's office to conduct an investigation, and if that investigation warrants prosecution, to prosecute to the fullest extent of the law.
Now I know there's an ongoing situation, and I wouldn't ask you to speak into particulars. The New York State Attorney General Snyderman actually brought charges up against the Mount Vernon mayor for campaign finance irregularities or whatever. Now, what I do want to ask you, so we can clear something up for the listeners, the mayor went, his attorneys, his legal representation, put out something that the Attorney General did not have, that the office did not have the authority to investigate him. And then sued I think they, tried to sue the Attorney General's office for coming after him. And then said Barbara Underwood didn't have the authority because she wasn't appointed by legislator at the time. She was just acting, but then they did vote her, and they did appoint her. So I just wondered, a lot of people don't understand about the authority that and again, and I'm not asking you to speak about the particulars of the case, because that's a case in litigation right now, but the authority of the Attorney General.
Sure, no, I'm happy to. So Barbara Underwood was the acting Attorney General for a period of time, but acting or not, she has the full powers of the Attorney General. But as of May 21st, when the legislature, in accordance with the state constitution, that's a process is provided for under our state constitution, the legislature voted her in. She is now the Attorney General of the state of New York until the end of the year. Now, there have been some discussions about, well, to what extent does the Attorney General have the authority and the power, acting or not, to prosecute corruption? Let me be unequivocally clear, and I'm not going to speak to the particular situation of Mount Vernon because I don't know all the facts, right. But we have a corruption problem in this state.
Right.
We have a corruption problem in this state, from one end of the state to the other, and that's one of the reasons,
including our end of the state and our city.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why people are so disgusted with politics. They're disgusted with the corruption. They're disgusted with deals. That's why we don't have as many of our people going to vote as they should. Although I say, listen, you don't vote, you lose your right to complain. But back to the issue at hand, corruption. There is enormous authority and power and jurisdiction for the Attorney General to investigate corruption. Now, I believe it should be even broader than it is, but let me tell you briefly what that authority is and the basis for it. 7 years ago, the New York State Controller, who oversees, a massive pension fund, and the then Attorney General reached an agreement. It's a written document, a memorandum of understanding, in which, in short, this is what it says. The Attorney General of the state of New York is going to share the authority, the investigative power that the state controller has to investigate any allegations of corruption that concern taxpayer dollars. Because that's what the controller's in charge of, right? Managing taxpayer dollars. So, for example, an allegation of abuse of taxpayer dollars tied to an economic development program. Without question, the Attorney General can prosecute that. Alleged corruption involving taxpayer dollars used by a nonprofit or a corporation. Attorney General can investigate and prosecute that. And alleged corruption by elected officials paid with taxpayer resources if the alleged corruption concerns conduct that took place while they're getting paid as with state taxpayer funds. That is another basis for investigation of corruption by the Attorney General's office.
Let me stop you right there. What if, like in the particular case I spoke on, it was the campaign finances during the campaign before the person was elected and then therefore being paid?
So not speaking to that particular issue, but when it comes to campaign finance issues, and again, without getting in too much detail, but here's the kind of the 30,000 foot set of circumstances. Campaign finance laws are overseen by something called JCOPE, the Joint Commission on Public Ethics. And that commission is supposed to basically conduct investigations and make referrals to the Attorney General's office in many instances if there's allegations of corruption. And one of the issues that I have been focusing on as a candidate is I think we need to get rid of JCOPE. We ought to have a non-partisan commission that deals with campaign finance, that investigates campaign finance, and that can refer any potential matter of corruption directly to the Attorney General's office. There is nothing that's in place right now like that, but I believe that there will be, and there will be soon, because I as a candidate have been calling for it, but many New Yorkers across this city, across this county, and across this state want it. They want an independent body that doesn't have to wait for anybody to say, okay, refer this matter to the Attorney General's office. This independent, nonpartisan body can do it. The bottom line is we got way too much money in politics. That's why I support public financing of campaigns. The fact that somebody can contribute $65,100 to somebody running for statewide office is obscene. So I support public financing of campaigns. There will be no more aggressive investigator or prosecutor of corruption than I am. I am running in many respects as the most qualified, starting with the fact that I got more courtroom experience as a litigator, 28 years since I graduated from Harvard Law School, more courtroom experience than any other candidate by far. It's not even close than any other candidate in the state, starting with when I graduated from Harvard Law School 28 years ago and worked for the first black man to serve a full term on the state's highest court. Fritz W. Alexander, he's got an Irish name, but he's a black man. He died a few years ago. May he rest in peace. And first actually African-American man or woman to serve a full term on the New York State Court of Appeals, the state's highest court. So we need to clean up the corruption that is, and I hate to say this, that is really rampant. We've got to clean that up. We've got to fix it. And I will do it as Attorney General.
I have one more question in that area, and then we're going to move on from that situation altogether.
Yes.
So in this, the state controller, I guess, figured out what was going on and referred it to the Attorney General. And that's what, in his challenges, that he said they didn't have the authority to do that.
Well, again, I'm not going to speak to the specifics, but what I will tell you is that the power of the New York State Controller that oversees a pension fund of more than $100 billion and that is charged with making sure that no taxpayer funds anywhere in this state are abused has significant authority. Now, campaign finance laws technically don't deal with state taxpayer funds. They deal with the contribution that you, Bob, or you, AJ, or I, Leecia, may make to another candidate. So in that sense, technically, those contributions are not state taxpayer funds, but the power to investigate and prosecute is broad. And I would say to any person, and again, not speaking to the particular situation involving here in Mount Vernon, folks got to be careful about violating any law, whether it concerns state taxpayer funds or not. I mean, think about it. Michael Cohen pled guilty to what? Violations of federal campaign finance laws. I believe the President of the United States should be impeached. He has committed an impeachable offense. He is an unindicted co-conspirator with respect to the violation of a federal campaign finance law. So, people may talk about semantics, but violation of campaign finance laws, whether it's a federal law or whether it's a state of New York or a local law, is serious business, and obviously nobody should be engaging it.
You have a couple of quick comments. Listener D. Wilson said the most dangerous woman in the world is an African-American woman who is knowledgeable, wisdom, and has knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, and education, and is the law. You better go get them, girl.
Oh, thank you.
And,
whoever said that, thank you.
And Floyd Myers, the older brother of the rapper Heavy D, he said, Miss Leecia, did I say your name right again?
Yes, you said it perfectly.
Miss
Yeah,
Leecia is 100% accurate and very knowledgeable.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And Damon K. Jones said, where is it at? He said, Leecia Eve for AG.
Oh,
Right.
God bless.
So I just want to get a couple of those out.
Thank you.
Someone has shared your website.
I'm humbled. Yes,
Yeah,
LeeciaEve.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm Twitter. Leecia, LeeciaEve.com, and Facebook page the same.
Welcome to everybody else who has joined us. Charles Stern, from Mount Vernon. I'm trying to get everybody because there's a few of y'all. Sean Barrett, Lat George, the lovely Sylvia Gonzalez, that's her Facebook name. Maggie Wade, I said Stanley Ridley. Who else? There was a few more. If I didn't mention you, I'm sorry. Thank you all. Gail Baxter from Yonkers,
Right.
former head of the Yonkers NAACP.
Oh, shout out to Gail. Thank you for your service.
The Future Society from Mount Vernon. Marvin Church, I think I mentioned his name before. Stephen Lewis from the legendary Atlantic Star. And everybody else tuned in. And before I go any further, Atlantic Star last year in September was awarded Atlantic Star Day in their home of Greenberg, and the street, a portion of the street, Tarrytown Road, I think it is now Atlantic Star Way. And sometime this month in September, it's in blackwestchester.com.
Oh,
They
that's
will be
wonderful.
doing a big celebration concert in one of the hotels, and that's coming up soon. So they'll be celebrating that whole thing. Shout out to Paul Feiner, the Greenberg town supervisor, and they will be portions of the proceeds from the concert will go to their alma mater, Woodland High School, which is Damon K. Jones High School. They've given back to their school.
That's
and
wonderful.
I just want to shout them out for their longevity, for their good music, and for their continued work that they do for their community. So they got to shout that out. So I wanted to give them credit for that. So I will definitely, Black Westchester will be there for the show. We will definitely be there for the show. Glenn Butler, I forgot to shout your name out though. Bob has some questions. I'll let go.
Yes, so Leecia, welcome. It's
Thank
an
you.
absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I want to ask you a question, and then I want to step back, perhaps to offer.
Correction, Doubletree Hotel and Tarrytown. That's where the concert will be. But go ahead.
I want to ask you a question related to the specific topic that we were addressing, because it's important for those of us in the city of Mount Vernon, whenever we have on expert guests, to try to get an informed perspective about many of the issues that we're grappling with, because there's a lot of cynicism and skepticism
Right.
about the validity of the charges that many people like myself have made with respect to Mayor Thomas's conduct in office after making a good faith to try to see whether or not it comports with the law. The question I have is, even though there may be issues about whether or not the Attorney General received the referral in accordance with New York State law, my impression is that political campaigns are themselves nonprofit corporations and therefore are subject to nonprofit corporation laws.
So
Can
they are not nonprofits, and that is why if you give $1 to your church, which is a nonprofit, that's tax deductible. But if you give $1 to a campaign, it's not tax deductible because it's not a nonprofit. It's not considered for profit, but that's why you can't deduct contributions to campaigns. But let me say this, and again, not speaking to the specific facts, because, the worst thing, and I know
Right.
this, as a lawyer, you don't want to comment on something when you don't know all the details. But what I will say is that we have district attorneys, right, in each of the counties across the state. Their ability to prosecute for a myriad of crimes, whether there's a referral or not, is significant. We have federal prosecutors. I mean, Preet Bharara, the former prosecutor of the Southern District of New York, is actually going to be the final co-moderator, the final Attorney General debate, which I'm very much looking forward to.
Beautiful.
Next Thursday. So
when and where is that?
that is going to be at Cooper Union in Lower Manhattan next Thursday. It's being co-moderated by Mr. Lair of NYC Radio. And the former U.S. Attorney of the Southern District of New York that President Donald Trump fired, even though he was doing a great job rooting out corruption.
Right.
So thank you for the clarification. Because we have such a crowded field for Attorney General this campaign season, I wondered if we could step back and actually offer up our listeners some background information about you.
Oh, I would
you said
yes.
you said that you'll be ready to
ready
take
to hit
over.
the ground running.
And why don't you tell us about your
And I will tell you,
credentials?
I'm really proud. I woke up yesterday morning to an endorsement from the Albany Times Union, which is the state capital's paper, unanimously endorsing my candidacy, and the Queen's Tribune. So if everybody Googles Queen's Tribune and Leecia Eve, they made a point of saying that every single member of their editorial board, there was unanimous agreement that the Queen's Tribune should endorse my candidacy. But a little bit about myself: born and reared in Buffalo, New York, the daughter of two great public servants. My mother, who taught English for 33 years, and in her retirement, never being paid $1, founded what became the largest and most comprehensive alternatives to incarceration for women in the state of New York in the state's history, for which she received national recognition. But many people know my father. If any of your listeners out there are EOP or HEOP graduates, they went to college because of my father, Arthur Eve from Buffalo. He served with distinction in the New York State Assembly for 36 years, the first African American to be deputy speaker. He served in that role for 20 years. He first ran for office in 1967. He ran, I should add, as not the party endorsed candidate, but ran and won, and as a freshman member of the Assembly, crafted the legislation that created the EOP and the HEOP programs, through which more now than 100,000 primarily black and brown young men and women have gone on to college who otherwise might not have been able to go. And I say that because I'm 54 years of age as of last week. I'm proud of my efforts over my entire adult life to improve the lives of New Yorkers, but I stand on the shoulders of two extraordinary people that I'm proud to call my parents. But born and reared in Buffalo, product of the Buffalo Public Schools, Smith College, the John F. Kennedy School of Government, Harvard Law School. Yes, I went to law school with both Barack and Michelle. I knew them individually before they even met each other. She was Michelle Robinson back in the day, but as fierce as she is today, that's exactly how fierce she was when we were in law school almost 30 years ago. As I mentioned earlier, clerk for judge on the New York State Court of Appeals. And so people understand this. The State Court of Appeals is like the Supreme Court of the United States, but it's the highest court for New York State. So for 2 years, I'm having discussions with judges on the state's highest court about the most fundamental legal issues of our time, based upon the state statute and state constitution. I have more courtroom experience than any other candidate in this race in federal courts across the state. And the case that I am most proud of, is a case when I was barely 30 years old. Matter of fact, we filed suit when I was 29. I represented as a class every single woman incarcerated at District of Columbia prisons against the District of Columbia. At 29 years of age, with 3 other young women lawyers, we took on the DC prison system, and we fought hard. We had a lot of setbacks, but we stayed the course, and we won. I was in charge of the obstetrical gynecological care part of the case. One of my clients literally had her legs shackled to a hospital bed as she brought a child into this world, a woman who looked like us. This conduct was inhumane, it was unjust, it was clearly unconstitutional, and we brought suit and we won. And I say that because I forgot how young I was when I represented hundreds of women incarcerated in DC prisons. That's the kind of what we call baby lawyer. When you're not 30 years old and you're practicing law, we call ourselves baby lawyers. That's what I did as a baby lawyer. That gives you some glimpse, some sense of the kind of attorney general I will be. After that, I served as one of Joe Biden's counsels when he was a top Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee, helping him advance positive immigration reforms, and most significantly, helping him implement the Violence Against Women Act, which he authored, working with hundreds of organizations across the country whose sole purpose is to support survivors of domestic violence and physical assault. I worked for Joe in 95 and 96, and here we are in 2018. And what are the issues that are front and center in our national debate? Immigration and the continued abuse of women, some men, and also children. Proud that I served as the first Senate counsel and Homeland Security advisor to the Honorable Hillary Rodham Clinton for 4.5 years. Was in the trenches fighting with Hillary to advance reproductive rights, women's rights, pay equity, criminal justice reform, civil rights, voting rights, environmental rights, fighting for good judges, fighting against bad judges. I'm proud that I worked with a lot of black women in particular in Westchester and across the state and across the country, because a lot of people saw this bust in the United States Capitol, the rotunda, of women who were great suffragists who fought to get women the right to vote. But they were white women, and a lot of people, both black and white women, said, well, wait a minute, where's Sojourner Truth? Sojourner Truth was an abolitionist, but Sojourner Truth, who was born enslaved in New York,
ain't I a woman?
Suffragist. Yes, ain't I a woman? Mm-hmm. Ain't I a woman? She was a suffragist way ahead of her time. I crafted the legislation that Hillary introduced in the Senate and that Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee introduced in the House, passed both bodies. And let me tell you, that involved me, talking to my white Republican counterparts in the Senate. I had to explain to them who Sojourner Truth was and why she needed to be honored. But you know what? To their credit, they heard us out. We did that education, and today in the United States Capitol, for the first time in our nation's history, there is a statue, there is a bust of a black woman, Sojourner Truth, for all the world to see. I more recently served as the first woman and the first person of color to be the Chief Economic Development Advisor to a governor of our state in the state's history. I oversaw 11 agencies in state government, from tax and finance to economic development. When I left the governor's office 5 years ago, they gave my job to 2 different people. But when I had it, I took care of business. And I say all this to say, experience matters. We got somebody in the White House who has no idea what the heck he's doing, in addition to just not wanting to advance the cause of justice. And that's why, frankly, the Albany Times-Union and the Queens Tribune said, I'm ready to hit the ground running. I'm smart enough and secure enough to say, I don't know everything. Nobody knows everything.
Absolutely.
But I know where to go to get the advice and counsel from people who do. But I know about government. I know how to litigate. I know how to fight. But even more important, I know how to fight, and I know how to win. And that is why I believe I am the most qualified, most experienced, most prepared candidate to take on Donald Trump and win, and to deal with the issues that we have to deal with at home, and help us as a community move forward in addressing them.
A couple of quick comments. So Charles Stern of the Monty Charter School in Mount Vernon said, I wish this lady was running for governor. And Latif said, give it time. And D. Wilson, I gave you the comment before, she said, the queen has arrived.
Oh, God bless everybody who made those comments. Listen, I grew up, my parents taught me those of us who can fight need to stand up and fight for those who can't. The biblical version of that is, to whom much is given, much is required. Right. And I've been extraordinarily blessed in my life. And it's only half over. I'm 54. I got a long way to go. I have much more to do, much more to serve, much more to accomplish, because we got a lot more to do in our communities. But, we all got to step in and deal with this nonsense. And not everybody has to run for office, but there is a role for all of us to play. And this is the role that I feel best prepared to play on behalf of all New Yorkers, because it's crazy, and I'm running as Attorney General because we have to have somebody to defend and protect and empower all New Yorkers. And I got the experience and the commitment and the knowledge and knowing how to do it. in spades. But I really appreciate the shout outs from your informed viewers. And, I want to bring all that experience, all that commitment to bear to help us together tackle some of these challenges. They're going to be hard, but, I never give up from a challenge. If stuff was easy to do, we wouldn't have problems. But I'm best prepared to roll up my sleeve and work with everybody to get the job done.
Now we heard about who you are, the elected official. Who is Leecia the person?
Well, I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I have 4 brothers. 4 African-American men are my brothers. My eldest brother is Arthur Jr. My middle brother is Eric Vincent. My 2 youngest brothers are actually named after Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. My father knew them both.
I heard you say that. Yeah.
Yes. My 2 youngest brothers are twins. And my parents.
Malcolm and Martin.
Yes, Martin and Malcolm. My one's name is Martin King Eve, and I think he's watching, listening now. And the other one is Malcolm X Eve. My father knew both Martin King and Malcolm X, and he always believed that they were much more alike than they were different. The media at the time tried to portray Malcolm as this radical that wouldn't have anything to do with Martin, and Martin Luther King as being the exact opposite of Malcolm. And I think what history has shown us, they may have had slightly different means, but their goal of economic and social justice was really the same.
Well, they do that. They do that to us in the history of this country. They always find ways to form divisions, whether it's light skin, dark skin, east, west, whatever.
Yes.
They always find ways for us to fight amongst ourselves, and for our groups to fight amongst ourselves.
And we have to know how to move past that. So I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, I'm a caretaker, I'm a fierce advocate. One of the things that comes up, a lot of times reporters will ask me, and they'll ask the other candidates, but I'll just use myself, say, well, can you be independent? We have all this corruption. I said, listen, this is also part of who I am, AJ. For those of you who remember the Attica prison uprising, the
Yes.
riots in 71, I was 7 years old at the time. And my father, when he was in the state assembly, would get letters from inmates at Attica sharing with him their concerns about the conditions they were living in that were horrific. And my father was one of really a very small number of people that would respond to the inmates' concerns. My father actually has on more than one occasion in the late 60s would drive family members in Buffalo to Attica Prison, which is a long drive, to visit family members. And so when the riots broke out in 71 and I was 7 years old, the inmates had a very small group of people that they wanted to negotiate on their behalf. One of them was Tom Wicker, who was a writer for the New York Times, and my father was another person that they asked to come in. I learned recently one of the people they asked to come and negotiate on their behalf was Louis Farrakhan, and he did not come, but my father did. My father was actually the very first person to enter the Attica prison riot. And I didn't understand it at the time because I'm just 7 years old. But a few years later, even before I became a woman myself as a teenager, I realized my father went into that prison when my older brother was 14, when I was 7, when my brother Eric was 4, and my 2 youngest brothers were babies. My father went into that prison not knowing whether he would come out alive.
Right.
So when reporters ask me, can I be independent? Do I have what it takes to prosecute corruption? I say I'm the daughter of Arthur and Constance Eve, who have literally, in the case of my father, has risked his life to try to see if justice could be served. That is what I am made of. So yes, prosecuting corruption, light stuff, compared to what I bore witness to members of my own family doing because they felt compelled to do what they could to see the justice could be served.
How do you feel? We have a lot of black and brown listeners. How do you feel about the whole immigration thing? the border, and the kids being separated from their
It's
parents,
outrageous. It's outrageous.
and being held here. Some being held here in Westchester.
It's outrageous. It's a violation of federal law. It's a violation of federal law. I mean, I knew that from day one because of the work I did with Joe Biden, because immigration was part of the issue, one of the issues he focused on. This was not new to me. I knew right away the President of the United States is directing ICE to break the law. And fortunately, a number of federal judges reached the same conclusion, which is the reason why the President of the United States had to, work to reunite these families. Unfortunately, there was such incompetence, in addition to thuggery behavior by federal employees, that they're still trying to track down where all the children are so they can be united.
500 plus still.
I mean, this is the United States of America. Are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. So obviously this is an outrage, but you know what? Outrage is not going to unite these families. What we need to do is get that man out of office, not wait for 2.5 years. And listen, I would love to talk about my candidacy the whole time, but anybody who's listening, wherever you are in the United States of America, you need to vote for people who believe in justice and believe in fairness, whether it's in the state legislature or a member of Congress, and oppose people who don't, because we have to bring this nonsense to an end. Fortunately, our federal courts around the country, which is an independent branch of government, are looking at the law. And for people who say, well, people are, they're coming over the border illegally, let me tell you something. I also know this because of my work with Joe Biden, and I know this because I've represented people in the past who have sought asylum. One of the last matters I handled before I went to work for Joe was to represent on a pro bono basis a young brother who was fleeing violence from a West African country. People crossing the border, they're not crossing the border because they're looking for better economic opportunity. They are crossing the border because if they stay where they are going to be killed by a gang, or be sexually assaulted by their abuser. They are fleeing violence. That has, for decades, been a completely legitimate basis to seek asylum in the United States. So anybody crossing the border, if they're going through a checkpoint, even if they do not have their papers, if they are fleeing violence, they, under our existing federal laws, are entitled to have their day in court, so to speak, and be granted asylum.
So what about what they were saying, that domestic violence doesn't count? Like they were trying to say the people fleeing for domestic violence, they were trying to say that they don't qualify for asylum.
Absolutely not true. The President of the United States, who tries to, implement policy by tweets when he's had too much caffeine at 3 o'clock in the morning, has said that. But I'm here to tell him I know a heck of a lot more about our immigration laws than he does, because I actually have read them and I understand them and I know what I'm talking about. And that's just simply not the case. So whether you're fleeing violence from an abuser, violence from a drug cartel, violence from a corrupt government, those and other reasons are bases to seek asylum. It doesn't guarantee that you will get asylum, but it is a basis to seek asylum in this country, and that should never change. That changes who we are as a country.
2 comments from Gail Baxter, former president of the Yonkers NAACP. She said, "Vote like your life depends on it."
And it does.
Is my only encouragement to get folks to the polls. #shut Trump down. Damon K. Jones wrote, "If Leecia does not win, and I wish she will, we will have an opening in a few years in the Westchester County District Attorney's Office."
Well, listen. One of the things, I don't think I said my ballot number. So my ballot number is 7A.
Yes.
7A. Believe in Eve. Leecia Eve, believe in Eve. Everybody knows Eve from Adam and Eve, right? She may have gotten the apple, but in this case, Eve is goodness. 7A. For For those of you who believe in luck, 7 is a lucky number. For those of you who are children of God, as I am, the number 7 is a fabulous biblical number. It means perfection and completeness. So just remember that. Believe in Eve, Leecia Eve, 7A. And let me also remind your listeners and your viewers that, primary day is on a Thursday this year.
Now, do you know why that is?
Yes. So it's Thursday, September 13th. The reason why it's on a Thursday is because that Tuesday is September 11th, right? The anniversary of, the most significant terrorist attack on our nation. It's also a Jewish holiday, and so for both reasons, the New York State Board of Elections moved the election from Tuesday, September 11th to Thursday, September 13th. So I know it's confusing, but I can't underscore enough. Listen, I hope everybody votes for me because I'm running as the most qualified, most experienced candidate. Vote 7A, believe in Eve. But I'm going to just go out and say, you know what? Even if you don't vote for me, please just go vote.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't vote, not only are you losing your right to complain, but even more important than that, you are disrespecting the sacrifice that our ancestors made so that each and every one of us could register and vote without fear and intimidation. I mean, sometimes we have to remind people that literally there are people who lost their lives. They were lynched or burned alive or shot or beaten to death to ensure that each and every one of us, black, white, man, woman, young, old, rich, poor, to ensure that each and every one of us, but particularly black people, could register and vote without fear and intimidation. And so if you say, you know what, I don't feel like taking 15 or 20 minutes, I mean, I got to say shame on you.
Well,
shame on you.
I want
because that's disrespecting that sacrifice. So please vote. And please vote for me, I ask, as the person who is best prepared to take on Donald Trump and to win and to deal with the challenges that we have at home. A jacked up criminal justice system, lack of educational economic opportunity for all of our children. We got the opioid crisis we have to deal with. We have a housing crisis we have to deal with. We've got, bad voting laws. We got some of the worst voting laws in the country. That's all those issues. Those are on us as the state of New York to fix. And I am best prepared to work with all of you to help us address those issues so that our communities and our state can be as strong, as powerful, and as empowered as they can be.
Absolutely. And I want to add a couple of things to that. Shout out to Naz Duncan, young lady in Mount Vernon fighting for the justice of her son who was gunned down in the streets of New York, and has not been able to find justice for that situation. It wasn't at the hands of police; it was in the street, black on black. But we have to do. I mean, the issue that I've talked about more than any other, in addition to Donald Trump, is criminal justice reform. Because there's so many issues that are important. But I think at the end of the day, if we don't think if we don't have faith that our criminal justice system is fair, not a whole lot, matters. And I'm so sorry what happened to, that sister's loved one. Because, we have problems in our community, and one of the things that I've talked about is a need to expand educational economic opportunities so more of our children are not engaged with the criminal justice system in the first place. But, I support the legalization of marijuana. I support strongly the expungement. Now, why?
Because the justice system is not fair. I mean,
call a police hold.
You have somebody being picked up for recreational use, smoking weed on the street, and they're being picked up and arrested, and so they now have a conviction on their record. But someone who's living in the suburbs, doesn't have that conviction. So it's an unfair criminal justice system. And I believe that the conviction of every single person who has been convicted of recreational use of marijuana, their records should be expunged, because we got a lot of bright young people who got picked up for smoking weed when their wealthy counterpart in the suburbs would never get picked up on the street for smoking weed. Now it's more difficult for them to get a student loan, to be in public housing, to get a job, you name it. And so those are the reasons why I support those initiatives. But I also strongly support greater transparency in police disciplinary records. I mean, listen, the vast majority of law enforcement, I am not going to be on this show slamming law enforcement because, you know, when I'm walking down my neighborhood, which is a transitional neighborhood, I appreciate that there are cops on the street that do treat people with respect. And I believe the vast majority of people in law enforcement are good people who are trying to do the right thing. I think the person who hates a bad cop more than anybody else, other than the victim of the conduct of the bad cop, is a good cop who does play by the rules.
Absolutely.
But we, you know, in any instance, and I'm on record saying this, in any instance where someone has been killed or physically harmed as a result of police conduct or conduct of correction officers, like at Rikers Island, their disciplinary records need to be made available to the public. That should not be private. And New York is almost unique relative to so many states where it's hard to find out whether the police officer had a really good record, right? Which would be good for people to know. Hey, this person's been a law enforcement officer for 20 years, never had a problem with anybody in the community. And something happened, you know, and we got to look at the facts, but the fact that they didn't have disciplinary problems is pertinent to an investigation. In contrast to someone where something happened, somebody was hurt, and you look at this disciplinary record and you're saying, oh my Lord.
Yeah, so like somebody who,
Right.
like someone who
We
cost
ought
the
to
city
know
of Mount
those
Vernon
facts.
$1 million and charges. I mean, fees paid out for roughing people up for you know.
Right. We need to know what the facts are. So there is so much work to be done. I support strongly the elimination of cash bail. We have thousands of New Yorkers across this state, but particularly in the New York metro region, who are sitting in jail right now, not for days, not for weeks, but for months. And in the cases of some people, years in pre-trial detention, have not had their constitutional right to a speedy trial. And the only reason why they're in jail and somebody else isn't for allegedly committing the same crime is because they didn't have the cash to get out.
I said somebody's working on something, no cash bail. I got a couple of comments. Marvin Church said, I am a SUNY Albany grad. And I
SUNY.
SUNY
I'm
Albany
sorry,
grad,
SUNY.
yes.
And I knew your dad and the late Norman
McConney.
Jr.
Oh, yes.
We have a caller.
SUNY.
SUNY. I'm
Albany.
sorry. Oh wait. Hold on. That was me.
Yes,
Let me turn it-
SUNY stands for State University of New York. It's one of the state's. SUNY Albany is a spectacular four-year college university. Yes.
Caller, please, are you on the People Before Politics radio show? Please state your name and your purpose for calling.
Hey, yo, it's Damon.
Oh, Damon.
D, what up,
I didn't
man?
even recognize the number. Okay.
Yeah. This is that secret phone number that I
The bat phone. Okay, there you go.
Yeah. No, I Leecia, I apologize. I couldn't make it. I couldn't make it tonight. You know, I know I invited you.
Well, you're
and,
here in spirit.
Yes, and I watched the whole show, and like many that are on Facebook and watching, we are very impressed. Please stay engaged. You know, I think a lot of people are going to support you. I see it on the thread, and I'm going to support you because I like the history of the struggle, and you understand.
Well, thank you. I'm very honored by that.
Yeah, I couldn't. At the debate, but after hearing you for an hour talking, I think a lot of people will be impressed about what you have been doing, and your experience even in legislation is great, and your understanding of procedural justice for people of color. It's refreshing,
Thank
you know. So I'm going to get behind you, and I hope everybody else is listening will get behind you on this Democratic primary. And like I said in the thread, we always have a DA's opening in a few years. and I am dead serious about that. and people that know me that's listening, they know I'm that serious.
Well, listen, you know what? I am so blessed and humbled, frankly, to be able to seek this office, because running for office is not easy. It's hard, but it's a blessing. It's an honor. It's an honor for be able to make my case, and frankly, it's even more of an honor to hear from New Yorkers who have struggled and who are continuing to struggle, but who have the courage to try and turn their lives around. I spent a good portion of the day at the Fortune Society. This is probably 2 weeks ago, and it's based in New York City. It was founded about 50 years ago, and its sole purpose is basically to help with reentry for brothers who have done time. In some cases, we've been incarcerated for a very long period of time. And I was supposed to come and talk for 10 or 15 minutes. And I wound up speaking for about a half hour, and I took probably about a half hour, 45 minutes of questions. And I wound up being at the Fortune Society for basically most of the day, pretty much shaking the hand with every single person who had done time, because, frankly, they made a mistake, but they paid their debt to society, and I was honored to be in their presence. Because I know it's hard. It's hard. Here you are, you've been incarcerated in some cases for years, and then you're out and the world has changed, and then you're expected to find a job, not get in trouble, reconnect with your family you haven't seen. There are all these issues you have to deal with, and here are all these brothers who are trying so hard to really turn their lives around, so they're not going back to prison, and so they can lead productive lives for themselves and their families. And so I take strength from so many New Yorkers that I'm so honored to be in their presence, no matter where they are, whatever their position, whether they're a university president, whether they're a teacher or doctor, or whether they're someone who was previously incarcerated, whether someone who was battling, addiction, but has the courage to go to get treatment. And in that instance, I've asked them, if I were Attorney General, what would you want to have happen? They said, listen, 15 days is not enough. Insurance companies need to give 30 days. I had a treatment counselor say to me, I was in the back of a Lyft car. Every time I'm in a Lyft, I give my campaign literature to the driver. I ask them to vote for me, 7A, and they're so shocked that, they got, potentially the next Attorney General in the back seat. And I always ask the Lyft drivers, I ask them about their issues. One of the last Lyft drivers I got was a gentleman who works in a treatment facility, and he said, Leecia, even after people are completely clean after 15 or 30 days, we put them right back where they were before. They're going back sometimes in the same place with other people who are using. So how can we expect them to be successful? We need to do a whole lot more to transition people, whether they've done time or whether they've come clean through a drug treatment program. And, all of this is not necessarily the purview of the Attorney General's office, but the goal of the Attorney General at the end of the day is to do justice. It's to do justice, and I will be a tireless fighter to working to ensure that justice is served and that our communities are as strong as they can be. But I can't tell you how humbled and honored I am to have your support, Damon. I mean, you have been on the front lines in keeping our communities safe for so long. You bear witness to so much, what we have accomplished and what we have yet to do, and I'm just extraordinarily honored to have your support. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's great. I will hang up now and let y'all continue the show. Bob, AJ, y'all doing a great job, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good,
Thank
D.
you.
We'll
Thank
talk
you.
later, man.
All right. I just want to say thanks for Damon for calling in, and also I didn't mention the September issue is out now. It should be hitting the streets over the next couple of days, wherever it hasn't hit the streets yet, and the digital issue, I just posted a link. You can read it right now. The digital issue, very powerful stories in there, including the cupcake cutie standoff. I don't know if you heard about that.
No,
the day after Damon hosted the
forum. Yeah, White
the,
Plains.
the next day, the mayor of Mount Vernon had his daughters
Circumvented the administrative procedures.
had his daughter attempted to have his daughter's shop shut down without due process.
Damon's daughter
Yeah,
shop?
yes.
Oh my Lord. Oh.
So and we were saying that it was retaliation for David being a big critic, but someone further up in county government called and said, that has more to do with what you did last night. You hosted the Attorney General Forum, and it's a good chance that the winner of that forum will be the person prosecuting him.
Yeah, well, you know
You know,
what?
so-
This, as I said at the outset, we have a corruption problem in this state, and it saddens me and it angers me because, well, I hope we are all angered by it, but the reason why it really saddens me is because I know what good public servants can do. You know, my parents, for me, are my best examples. I mean, my father, his experience at Attica, ultimately getting justice for inmates that he believes were killed by the state of New York, as well as for the prison guards who were. His work with EOP, my father's the author of the lead paint law, the author of the school-based health law, the author of the nurse practitioner laws. Nurse practitioners exist in this state because my father created the legislation to create them, to provide more means for people to receive health care. And so I know that public servants and elected officials in particular, if you've got a committed public servant, like I will be as Attorney General, who views their sole mission as doing justice and improving and transforming lives, working with the community, there's really nothing that can't be achieved. So when you have elected officials that conduct themselves in a way that is the antithesis of that really is a black mark on everybody else, that angers me and it saddens me, because you know what? It's another reason why young people, our best and our brightest, decide that they don't want to go into public service. We want our best and brightest in everything. Teachers, doctors, lawyers, in the communications space, law enforcement, firefighters, you name it. But we want our best and brightest. We want them in public service too.
Right.
And when they see things like this, when they see corrupt official after corrupt official, and even officials that may not necessarily be breaking the law, but are not holding themselves to the highest standard, it's another reason for our best and our brightest to not even give public service a look. And we all lose out when that happens. And so we have got to fix this. And I know people have been talking about it a lot of times, for a long time, but I am not going to be playing around. I will investigate and I will prosecute corruption in this state no matter where I find it. So anybody who's thinking about engaging in corrupt activity, you need to stop it right now.
And just
because
so we
when
clear,
I'm Attorney General on January 1, you're going to be on the wrong side of the law and on the wrong side of this fierce litigator.
And just so-
I was a very good lawyer representing women prisoners and clients across the state, and I'm going to be a very good lawyer as the next Attorney General of the state of New York. If everybody gets out and votes, believes in Eve, and votes 7A Leecia Eve for Attorney General.
and just for the record, you're running on the Democratic Party.
Oh, yes,
but
I'm running as a Democrat.
It
yes.
won't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican if you're breaking the law.
Oh, absolutely not. Oh, absolutely not. You could be the most beloved Democrat in the state, but if you're breaking the law, guess what? You are going to be held to account. You will be held to account.
I asked that because of the national level, how, there are Republicans that don't believe in what's going on with the president, but they're Republican and they're backing him, and they have the power to do something about it, but they're not because of the party affiliation.
That's why I said early on, because I know you have a lot of listeners that are not just in Westchester County. You may have listeners and viewers who are in other parts of the state, and there are a lot of congressional races in this state where the current member of Congress is a Republican, but where Democrats have a chance of winning that seat in November New York could be pivotal in the entire country, could be pivotal in turning the House of Representatives from Republican to Democrat. And that is so important for so many reasons, a lot of legislative and policy reasons, but it's also important because it's the House of Representatives that prepares the articles of impeachment against the President of the United States. So, I mean, everybody's just got to get out to vote. I don't care where you are, if you're in Westchester, New York, anywhere in the state, anywhere in the nation. I mean, just exercise your right to vote and make your voices heard. I tell folks, listen, Donald Trump, there are no words to fully describe how I feel about him and what he's doing to this country, but we will get through this.
I said that last week.
We have gotten through slavery. We have gotten through lynchings. We have gotten through the worst of abuse in the civil rights movement, the voting rights movement, the women's movement, and the justice movement. And we will get through this.
And the country survived the Civil War.
And the country will survive, and we will be stronger for it. But we will get through this more quickly if people do exercise their most constitutional right. And for everybody out there who hates Donald Trump, right, and hates what he's doing to our country, let me tell you this. The reason I think, in part, why he's acting like he's acting, he's like acting like a quartered animal, right? The closer the Bob Mueller is getting to him, the more anxious he's getting, the more tweets he's doing, right? Because he knows he's about to go down. And so he's scared. The President of the United States is running scared. And he's running scared in part because he knows something that I know that I think a lot of your viewers and listeners do not know. And that is, you have no idea, listeners and viewers out there, you have no idea how powerful you are. You have no idea how powerful you are. I don't care if you don't have any money. I don't care if you're homeless. I don't care if you don't have a graduate degree or a high school diploma. If you are registered to vote, you are powerful. You are powerful. And that's why you need to exercise that power. And that's why he's so scared. But we need to exercise that power and vote.
Some of our listeners have asked, and I do this with every candidate. So for people that are just seeing you for the first time, they're impressed. They want to know more about you.
Yes.
How, share your
Go to my
website, social media,
yes.
all of that.
www.LeeciaEve.com. That's LeeciaEve.com. Leecia Eve. Check out my Facebook page. Check out a video. Google Leecia Eve in 1984. You'll see a very powerful video that talks about how crazy this president is. But on my watch, as the Attorney General, I'm going to protect and defend and empower all New Yorkers. But I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, on Twitter. Check out my website. Would appreciate, any support your listeners could have, provide, spread the word. But most important, get out and vote. I ask you to believe in Eve. Vote 7A Leecia Eve to be your next Attorney General. I will not let you down. I will not let you down. Thank you so much,
Not a problem.
AJ and Bob, for having me. It really has been an honor. And thank you again for all of you do to make sure that so many of us are educated and informed.
Absolutely. And this is the cover of the September issue on the screen right there. The young lady on the right is Damon's daughter, the owner of that business.
Oh, wow.
And they fought, and she figured she didn't do anything wrong, and she was not going to leave so they could shut her down. And there was a standoff till 12:30 at night, and
Wow.
they fought, and
courageous young woman.
and the news covered it and everything, and it brought her a lot of attention, a lot of free advertisement. Political elected officials, celebrities, including Jeff Redd, the singer from Mount Vernon, have gone to the shop.
I'm going to the shop. I'm going to go to the shop.
And posted pictures of them at the shop, that they
Right,
support.
right.
The county exec is is coming through this week, buying like 5 dozen and giving it away to the seniors or something like that.
Well, I
And,
love sweets.
yeah.
I love sweets. So I'm gonna go to the shop. Is it still open? Is it open right now? Do you think?
It should be. It's 8 Southwest, down the street from Grace Baptist Church. If you know what Grace Baptist Church is.
Yes, I do.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I
Go
ask a
ahead.
question? Yeah. Since our Democratic County Party leader and Commissioner Reggie Lafayette has joined us, at least was on air, one issue that has been raised recently regarding the issue of corruption throughout New York State is the laws that allow commissioners of the local board of elections to also simultaneously serve as party leaders, thus setting up a possible conflict of interest. I know that there's been discussion in the New York State Legislature for some time now about reforming it to create a clear division between the two, and hopefully to bring some of those conflicts of interest to an end. And I was wondering if you have any position on this particular arrangement that we have in New York, which I think tends to engender corruption. And if so, how would you?
No, that's interesting. I've never been asked that question before. I don't, as a matter of principle, if there is an elections commissioner who also is a party activist and a leader,
Well, the party chair, yes.
I don't necessarily have a problem with that. And I will say, listen, your viewers may know I'm not the endorsed candidate. I'm a proud Democrat, but I am not the endorsed candidate. But I am proud that I'm on the ballot, not because one person endorsed me or because a few people in the room endorsed me. 40,000 New Yorkers, including in Westchester County, across the city of New York, across Long Island, all the way to Buffalo, New York. I got signatures from Plattsburgh.
Wow.
On the U.S.-Canadian border. New Yorkers across the state. I only needed 15,000 signatures across the state to get on the ballot in 14 of the 27 congressional districts. I got more than 40,000 in a matter of weeks across 21 congressional districts. And I'm so proud that it's the people of the state of New York, tens of thousands strong, to put me on the ballot. So, and some of those people were people who bucked the state party in different counties across the state, who said, Leecia, you know what? The state party may have endorsed somebody else for purely political reasons, but I believe you're the best attorney general candidate, and so I'm going to circulate petitions for you. And in some cases, those people, work for the Board of Elections as well. So, full disclosure, I don't necessarily see anything implicitly wrong with it. Here's the problem. When you do run the Board of Elections, you do have a lot of power. And so I think we need to be watchful. To make sure that power is not, abused.
I personally have said it was a conflict of interest because the Board of Election Commissioner does what's best for the people, and the party chairman does what's best for the party, and that sometimes they are not always the same thing. So I thought,
No, I understand
so you
what
can't
you're
have.
saying.
So
No,
you
I
can't-
understand what you're saying.
I can't have
Yeah.
one person fight himself. You know what I'm
Right,
saying? Like you don't,
right.
you know what I'm saying? If there's a problem, I go run tell the board commissioner that the chairperson did something wrong. I'm telling Reggie did this. Like that doesn't work. But
Right.
I mean, personally, he's a cool dude, very knowledgeable. I have no problem. I just think in those incidences, there are times when it could be a conflict because those two roles sometimes oppose each other.
Well, listen, I definitely understand your point, and I think at the end of the day, one of the reasons, frankly, why that issue was raised, my guess is because there is so much corruption generally.
And
corruption at all levels of government.
Damon said there is a bill in the assembly. I don't know how far it's gone.
To basically say
separate,
you got to pick.
Yeah.
You're either going to be the party chair or
but
the top elections
and
official,
again,
not both.
and
Got
again, for full disclosure, I do say this about Reggie Lafayette, the Westchester chairman, but it's not just the Democrat, the Republican.
Republican.
But the Republican Doug Colte,
right.
the chairman, is also the Board of Election Commissioner for the Republicans. So
Right.
it's not a him thing. I just think the two
As a
titles,
matter of principle.
no matter what party it is,
Right.
one is job to do what's best for the people, and one is job to do what's best for the party, and those two things don't always align.
Right.
And
Well, I
it
will
was just
take
in
I will
that
take a look
situation.
at that bill. Listen, I'm smart enough and secure enough, as I said earlier, to acknowledge what I know and what I don't know. I wasn't familiar with that bill, but I will take a look at it. But thank you so much for the question. Because at the end of the day, people do need to have faith, not just in their criminal justice system, but in our voting laws. And, this is another area where I worked on with Hillary. I crafted legislation that the New York Times editorializes the gold standard for election reform. It had felon reenfranchisement. It had election day registration. It had no excuse absentee balloting. It had early voting. Right. So people have to have faith that the voting process and our voting laws, have, the greatest integrity. And if that piece of legislation is designed to support that goal, that is something that I would take a hard look at.
Coming to the close of the show, 30 seconds or less, why are you the candidate that the people listening should vote for?
I'm running as the most qualified, most prepared, most experienced candidate to take on Donald Trump. Is not just about fighting, but is knowing how to fight and how to win. I'm also the best prepared candidate. My roots in this state run deep. I'm the best prepared candidate to help us grapple with the challenges that we own as a state, to help us move forward. I've been fighting for social justice my entire adult life. From the time that I represented those women incarcerated in District of Columbia prisons, when I took on the District of Columbia prison system, and I won. That's the kind of baby lawyer I was at 29 years of age, and that's the kind of attorney general I will be. And I, again, ask your voters to vote for Leecia Eve, Believe in Eve, 7A, and I will be so proud to represent each and every one of you on January 1 as the next attorney general of the great state of New York.
In closing, I'm getting some text messages. There are some individuals who will remain nameless who are right now at home smoking, saying, "Oh, I like that. She's going to legalize. They're going to legalize marijuana."
Well,
No, but I'm just saying.
Vote
They said, I like that. She might get my vote. I'm just saying. We do have some listeners that are partaking right now.
Multitasking.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I definitely want to, like I said, we got RapperCon coming up this Saturday. The Atlantic Star concert is September 27th at the Doubletree in Tarrytown. Again, half of the proceeds go to the alma mater, which is Damon's alma mater, Woodlands High School. So everybody come out and support them. Make sure you get a copy of the current issue. Like I said, the digital, I just shared the link to the digital copy. The print issues will be hitting the streets this week. Shout out to Don D.P. Powell of D.P. Printing, who has been doing a miraculous job on those T-shirts that you see. We will have the September issue on a T-shirt available for sale for $25. Hit me on Facebook. I'll send you the link. You can pay for them in advance. We're taking orders now. And we have just started the advertising for the October issue, and we're running a 10% discount to anybody who advertises in the October issue and pays for their advertising, their hands in their artwork by the 7th. You will get a 10% discount on the cost of your advertising. So thank you for everybody who supports us. Thank you for everybody who's listening, for tuning in. I will be breaking this up so you can watch the interview and posting it later on blackwestchester.com so you can watch it and share it with others. Until next week, this is the People Before Politics radio show every Sunday night, 6 to 8 on intermixradio.com. Next week, we will have State Senator Andrea Stewart Cousins and State Senate candidate Biaggi, Alexandria Biaggi. I hope I pronounced her name right.
You got it.
And next week, since it's the last week before the primary, we will be coming on for an extra hour. So instead of 6 to 8, we will be on at 5 o'clock from 5 to 8. And we will be dealing with all the races in the primary and who's running and, try to inform you. And then we will have the senator come through, the state senator, the highest ranking black woman in the state of New York. And we will have Senator Klein's opponent, Biaggi, who You know how I feel about that. Senator Klein and what he did with the IDC, he got to go. The whole IDC got to go. Anybody running against a candidate
Gotta go.
that was in the IDC, they need to be voted out because of what they did to Senator Andrea Stewart Cousins.
Amen.
To try to divert her power. So I'm not feeling that, and we're supporting any candidate running against an IDC member, and that includes Klein. And so Biaggi, I don't endorse people, but she has my support because she's going against IDC Klein, who's still up to his tricks or whatever. So until next week, peace.
22 million black victims of Americanism are waking up, and they're gaining a new political consciousness, becoming politically mature. And as they develop this political maturity, they're able to see the recent trends in these political elections. Any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position. Either way you go, that's who gets it. You're in a position to determine who go to the White House and who stay in the doghouse. You're the one who has that power. You and I have never seen democracy. All we've seen is hypocrisy. When we open our eyes today and look around America, we see America not through the eyes of someone who has enjoyed the fruits of Americanism. We see America through the eyes of someone who has been the victim of Americanism. We don't see any American dream. We've experienced only the American nightmare. We haven't benefited from America's democracy. We've only suffered from America's hypocrisy. And the generation that's coming up now can see it and are not afraid to say it. 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 And I'm not afraid to say.